Managing personal finances during crisis, right now on the Leadership Voice. Welcome to the Leadership Voice. I'm your host, Jay Barbuto. Today's show features the importance of financial literacy, especially during crisis or trying times. Joining us today is Radha Bhattacharya, Professor and Director of the Center for Economic Education at Cal State Fullerton. Also joining me will be Steven Nguyen, Business Analyst and Adjunct Professor of Economics at Cal State Fullerton. Welcome, both of you, to our show.
Thank you, Jay.
Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you guys on the show. Why don't we start with Radha? Radha, could you please tell us a little bit more about financial literacy? What is it, and why does it play such an important role in our community?
Sure, Jay. So financial literacy is having the skills, knowledge, and also the confidence to make good financial decisions. Why is it important? Oh my goodness, if you look at the financial crisis that happened 12 years ago, that 2008 global financial crisis was actually triggered by the lack of financial literacy of households. So what happened was that, households were not aware that the adjustable rate mortgages that they took, if they just went up by a few percentage points, that would translate into a large increase in their monthly mortgage payments. The households could not afford that. They defaulted on their mortgage payments. Those opaque mortgage-backed securities that nobody understood. And, it's described so very well in that movie, Big Short. So those mortgage-backed securities, they became worthless, and that triggered the global financial crisis. And after that, schools have realized the importance of teaching financial literacy at an early age. More and more states are mandating the requirement of teaching financial literacy. Right now, we have 21 states that mandate teaching financial literacy in high school. So that was the good thing that came out of the financial crisis, Jay.
Would you say that financial literacy and the need for its education has increased over the past several years?
Definitely. So another thing that's going on is that in international studies, so for example, recently there was a survey of 15-year-olds across the world, and it included some of the wealthiest countries. Our American high school students ranked somewhere in the middle, and their scores in financial literacy were lower than Finland, Poland, Estonia. So when educators realize that there is this need to fill the gap, more and more schools have started teaching financial literacy. And in California, actually, financial literacy is not mandated in the curriculum. In the center, we've been teaching 6 to 8 lessons of financial literacy in an economics class, and we have found that it is actually having an impact.
So financial literacy and the effects of it seem to be quite dramatic. Could you talk a little bit more about why people must develop this skill?
Oh, this skill is very important, Jay. Let me just give you some examples as to what lack of the skills can do. So for example, if someone has a $1,000 outstanding credit on their credit card, let's say someone buys something worth $1,000 and pays the minimum amount every month, which is 3%. So pay $30 every month. It's gonna take, at the interest rate of 18%, it's going to take 8 years to repay that $1,000 with interest. And the total interest payments, believe it or not, is going to be $800, which is almost as much as how much you borrowed to buy whatever it was, a guitar or whatever that was, an impulsive purchase. So when we realize that we are spending so much, we're putting so much toward interest payments, it is because of the lack of financial literacy, or if you take a payday loan of $500 and you pay just $75 as the fee that you're going to pay back in 2 weeks, your annual percentage rate is of interest is almost 400%. So people realize that they're making these very costly mistakes. So things like, where is your paycheck directed to? What do you understand your paycheck? How much are you putting in 401k, 403b? Are you putting the maximum amount possible? Are you deducting the maximum amount of voluntary deduction so that the taxes that you're paying, your taxable income, is the lowest possible? Are you saving for an emergency like today, the COVID-19 crisis? So, last year there was a Federal Reserve study which came to a very shocking observation that 4 out of 10 American households do not have $400, just $400 set aside for an emergency. And today is that emergency, the COVID-19 pandemic. And, a study that just came out last month by the National Endowment for Financial Education stated that 88% of the people they surveyed are under financial stress today. Financial stress about job insecurity, income fluctuations, not being able to pay their bills, having saved enough for retirement, and so on.
Well, it sounds like this is absolutely something that people have got to focus on and people have got to take seriously, not just for themselves, but really for the general economy. Could you talk about how people must manage their finances?
As I said, people should understand their paycheck and what is going on with what happens to the money that comes into their paycheck and how they're spending it. And my colleague, Steven, he has some great ideas that have worked for him. So let me have Steven answer these questions.
All right, we'll turn this over to Steven then. Steven, what are some of the techniques that young adults can utilize to manage their finances?
Right. So one of the biggest ones that I would consider is having like some type of budgeting app, right? One of the biggest ones that I use personally is something called Mint. A lot of young people actually do know this, but if you don't know, it is essentially it's a budgeting app, right? A budgeting app that connects all of the information that goes, all of the information of what you are spending all into one particular place. And it's really good because it allows you to find out different ways, like how exactly are you spending, what money is being spent where, at how long, and how frequent are those payments being done, right? And so it's a very good idea to have an app that tries to track all of those things, because sometimes you just don't have the time to track, especially during this emergency where you're just trying to catch up on your payments. Knowing exactly where every single dime is going to is incredibly important. One thing about Mint that is also really beneficial is about also learning how to prepare for long-term planning. In the Mint app, because we are in the COVID-19 crisis, we are trying to catch up, right? But by using Mint also automates some of these automatic processes that allows us to figure out, hey, we can also do some long-term future goals, right? Because we still have goals in the future that we want to address, despite the fact that we're currently going through a lot of emergency events.
And so a lot of the answers, a lot of the solution is actually readily available for youth, and it's right on their phone. Does they need to download? Could you say the name of the app again?
Mint. So it's MINT, and once you go on, it's the very first app. It's supposed to be a budgeting app, so that would be the first one that would come up. Yeah.
That's great. Are there any other apps that might be valuable for people to think about?
Right. So if you have a little bit of extra money, then the second one I would suggest too is using Acorns. And Acorns is an app where you use change, and where you use change that you purchase on a daily basis. That change gets rounded up to the nearest dollar and be sent into investments. And with those investments, they would create like investment packages for you. So then you can pretty much invest in the long term. So it's like money that you never really think about because it's pulling off change and it's putting into an investment app where it accrues money over time. Now, unfortunately, during the COVID-19, the markets are extremely unstable right now, but it's actually a really good time to start looking into these investment type practices, because it's also one of the ways for you to grow wealth relatively quickly for the amount of money that you have.
Thank you, Steven. I have one more question for both of you before we take questions from our audience. What advice would you have for somebody that, such as we're in now, what advice would you have for somebody that is going through some type of a financial crisis? We can start with Radha.
So, Jay, most people are getting a stimulus check, the CARES Act, $1,200 check. So make sure that you received that check. An important thing to have is cash flow. So you should have enough cash on hand for about at least 6 months. And make sure that you know if you are allowed to defer paying your rent and so on. Check where your expenses are going. Use the app that Steven is suggesting, Mint, and see whether some of your expenses are going toward some unnecessary items. How many of us subscribe to some streaming service or some gym subscription or some magazine which says, oh, the first 3 months are free. So we sign up for that. And then before we know it, those 3 months are over. And then we are automatically paying for those subscriptions that we don't use. So use Mint and see whether your money is going, see where your money is going. And then, Steven can talk a little bit more about other things we can do today to help mitigate the effects of the crisis.
Steven, what advice would you give somebody going through a financial crisis? If a good friend of yours, someone maybe in their earlier career was facing tough times, what advice would you give them, Steven?
The biggest advice I would give it to people around my age, especially since I'm a relatively recent grad, and I'm actually a student right now doing my doctoral program. One of the biggest things I would say is to reach out, right? It's what Dr. Bhattacharya is, to look at information. But the biggest thing is to reach out, because there's a lot of people that I know of, including me, who wait until the last minute, or we struggle until the last minute when we finally ask for help and might be too late. So it's looking at using the Mint, seeing like, oh, what expenses are really huge, and start reaching out. If it's mortgage, reach out to the mortgage lender. If it's renting, reach out to like the people who are renting the place to you, right? There's a lot of resources out there. If it's food, there's a lot of food pantries that are out there that can really help. So just by asking for help, that is the biggest thing. That's always the first step. And within this challenging times, there's always people who are willing to help. If they may not able to help you with your specific problem, they may help you with how to get around it or things to do about it. The second thing that I would suggest is also look at your expenses, kind of like what Bhattacharya says in terms of streaming services. It's kind of like your extra items, right? Look at your extra items and see which ones can you eventually cut back, right? Find out ways that you can still have fun, because most of us, we end up spending money during this time for fun because we are stuck at home a lot, right? So looking at like things to make ourselves cheaper ways to have fun, and reaching out to other people to try to have that type of fun, but in a group setting, whether it's through Zoom or Teams or so forth.
Terrific. Well, I think we have time for maybe 1 or 2 questions from our audience. Rosie, do we have any questions from our audience, for our guests?
Yes, Jay. Our first question comes from Edward from Ontario. He asks, what advice can you provide to students that are being furloughed or laid off and having to apply for unemployment for the first time? How can they manage their finances during this time when they have no stable income?
So let me take a stab at that in general terms. First of all, the student should Edward should make sure that he gets all the unemployment insurance benefits that he's entitled to. The federal government is giving a supplemental unemployment insurance in addition to how much the state of California is giving. So go to the website and make sure that he's getting all the unemployment insurance benefits that he is entitled to. Times are tough, but we have overcome previous economic crises, and we will overcome this one also. And if Steven has any other ideas, I would let Steven take a shot at it also.
Sure. And so one of the things that I would say is for applying for unemployment insurance through the EDD, that definitely helps, right? Just sign up for it and you will see whether or not you're eligible for that. The Congress have passed a couple of laws that says that if you have reduced hours or you're being furloughed, there are ways you can still get that money through starting from May all the way to September. You just have to see whether or not you qualify for that. I don't know in this specific situation, but if you are a student worker, that would qualify under like the reduced hours package. And for that, you can definitely see what type of money. And if you are extremely unstable, that's where the Mint app comes in, seeing what is the minimum amount of money that you absolutely need in order for you to get through this crisis. And once you find that, then you can figure out how can I best maximize the money that unemployment insurance is willing to give me.
Okay, great. I think we have time for maybe one more question. Rosie, do we have a second question from our audience?
Yes. Our last question comes from Farida from Santa Ana. She asks, how do recent graduates manage their college expenses when job prospects look slim?
Okay, so, yes, this is a difficult time to be graduating. I think when this crisis is over, we will have a much stronger economy. The kind of jobs that are out there will change. So there will be jobs out there, but we need to be flexible and try other avenues. And also, this might be a good time to consider going to grad school or pursuing, just beefing up any training that you need, your Excel skills, maybe learn some coding skills. There's going to be a lot of need for medical coding. A lot of that is available free online. So maybe this is a good time to just strengthen our basic skills and training and be flexible and just be diligent and positive.
That's great. I want to thank you both for being on today's show. Today, we learned about the importance of financial literacy, especially during tough times. Please join us each episode of the Leadership Voice for the latest about leadership. I'm your host, Jay Barbuto, and we'll see you next time right here on the Leadership Voice.